Excellent the voyages that changed the world, rewritten in a soft, immersive, meditative night narration style, perfect for a USA History Saurus video. I kept it gentle, flowing, and atmospheric, like something heard late at night while drifting toward sleep. Chapter 2: The Voyages that Changed the World. Before the world knew compasses by heart, there were only stars and instinct. Sailors once measured courage by how far they dared to lose sight of land. The ocean was the last great mystery, a mirror for heaven by day, a black abyss by night. And yet into that darkness they went, chasing spices, gold, salvation, or simply the possibility that somewhere beyond the horizon the world began again. Dreams written on water. In 15th century Europe, imagination had become a weapon. Empires of the old world were hungry for wealth, for converts, for prestige. Portugal and Spain drew invisible lines across maps not yet complete, racing to find routes that would bend trade toward their ports. Navigators studied wind like scripture, tracing the gyres that circled the Atlantic. The age of exploration was not born from pure curiosity, but from necessity and ambition. Silk, pepper, faith and fame braided together. To the north, Norse legends already whispered of a place beyond the fog. Around the year 1000, Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red, guided a crew from Greenland to a forested shore they called Vinland. They built short-lived settlements, left behind iron nails and butternut shells, small traces of Europe's first accidental encounter with North America. Yet the ocean swallowed their memory for 4 centuries, until new nations, newly desperate, looked west again. When Christopher Columbus set sail in 1492, he carried letters of privilege from Ferdinand and Isabella, royal ambitions, and a mathematical error. He believed Asia was only a few weeks away. The ships, Nina, Pina, and Santa Maria, creaked like old prayers. Days turned to weeks, rations thinned, morale broke and mended. Then, in the soft hours before dawn on October 12, a cry of "Tierra" shattered the dark. They had not found the Indies, but an archipelago whose people would later bear the burden of that mistake. The Taino greeted the strangers with gifts of parrots, food, and wonder. Columbus, unable to see beyond his own myth, claimed their islands for Spain. Within decades, those same islands would be scarred by disease and conquest. Smallpox, measles, influenza, unseen armies that preceded soldiers swept through the Caribbean, erasing civilizations faster than swords. Yet the voyages continued. Spain's fleets became conveyor belts of empire. They carried conquistadors and friars, chroniclers and fortune-seekers, each convinced they served destiny. In Mexico, Hernán Cortés met the Aztec Empire, a city of canals and gold, of poetry and astronomy, and by cunning, fire, and betrayal, reduced it to ashes. In Peru, Francisco Peroza repeated the pattern. Entire worlds folded beneath banners embroidered with crosses and crowns.
A sea of names. Maps blossomed with invention. America, named after Florentine explorer Amerigo Vespucci, first appeared on a German map in 1507, a scholar's error that became geography's truth. The word spread like rumor until even those who had never seen the continent spoke of it. Across Europe, America became not a place, but a promise of endless land, of gold that glittered beneath every stream, of salvation from famine and feud. While Spain carved its empire through Mexico, the Andes, and the Caribbean, Portugal claimed Brazil, planting sugarcane and the machinery of slavery. French ships explored the St. Lawrence, meeting the Algonquin and Huron. The English, late to the race, hovered along the Atlantic, sending cautious expeditions to Roanoke and later to Jamestown. The Dutch sailed into the Hudson and claimed the river as if naming were ownership. Each flag brought its own motives, but all carried the same contagion, a conviction that discovery erased what came before. The invisible passengers. Of all the things that crossed the Atlantic, disease was the most decisive. Germs moved faster than gossip. Within a century of Columbus's landing, populations in the Americas had fallen by as much as 90%. Villages emptied, fields overgrew, and silence replaced laughter. The very landscapes seemed haunted by absence. European chroniclers described it as divine providence. Indigenous survivors called it apocalypse. But not all the movement flowed one way. The Columbian Exchange, the vast swapping of life between hemispheres, changed every dinner table on Earth. From the Americas went maize, potatoes, tomatoes, cacao, tobacco. From Europe and Africa came wheat, sugarcane, horses, pigs, and cattle. The world's diets, economies, and ecologies rearranged themselves. In this exchange of seeds and species was both abundance and ruin. The edge of faith. Alongside merchants came missionaries. Jesuits, Franciscans, and Dominicans carried crosses and catechisms into jungles and deserts. Some sought to protect indigenous converts from conquistadors. Others became agents of destruction, cloaked in sanctity. They translated languages, recorded myths, and sometimes burned the same manuscripts they had transcribed. Yet even within forced conversion, hybrid cultures bloomed. Saints wearing feathers, altars adorned with native flowers, prayers sung in two tongues. The continent learned to survive by weaving opposites. Northern visions. While Spain ruled the south, the north remained largely unmapped. In 1497 and 1498, the Venetian John Cabot, sailing for England, reached the cold coasts of Newfoundland, claiming them for Henry VII. French explorer Jacques Cartier followed, navigating the St. Lawrence and meeting powerful Iroquoian communities near present-day Quebec. They offered corn and hospitality. He offered trinkets and promises. For decades after, European ships came only seasonally, fishing the rich Grand Banks and trading for furs. Then came the 16th and 17th centuries, an age of permanent footprints. Samuel de Champlain founded Quebec in 1608. Henry Hudson sailed his eponymous river in search of a passage to China. England established colonies at Jamestown, 1607, and Plymouth, 1620. The coastlines filled with forts and missions, with gunfire and prayer.
The meeting of worlds. For Native peoples, first contact was not a single event, but an era, a slow dawn that turned quickly to glare. Some welcomed trade. Metal tools, wool, beads, and muskets transformed daily life. Others saw in these gifts a poison wrapped in novelty. Alliances formed, rivalries deepened. Tribes played European powers against one another, defending autonomy as long as possible. There were moments of true friendship. Pocahontas teaching English settlers to grow maize. Squanto guiding pilgrims through the first winter. Yet beneath those stories lay the pressure of expansion. The fur trade introduced wealth and dependency. Alcohol and weapons shifted balances of power. Treaties were written in languages that favored one side's understanding of land and law. Still, native resilience endured. Oral histories tell of councils convening to interpret the newcomers, of prophets urging unity, of ceremonies held to cleanse the world of imbalance. Even as waves of conquest rose, the continent's first peoples adapted with quiet brilliance, reshaping economies, preserving languages, and passing survival strategies to each generation. Empires on the horizon. By the late 16th century, the Atlantic had become a crowded corridor. Spanish galleons hauled silver from the Andes. English privateers hunted them under letters of marque. Caribbean waters glittered with cannon fire and pirate flags. Across Europe, the wealth of the New World fueled wars, cathedrals, and revolutions. The center of the world's gravity shifted westward. African shores, too, felt the new tide. As plantations spread through the Caribbean and Brazil, millions of Africans were captured and sold across the Atlantic. The Middle Passage became one of history's darkest journeys. Months of chains, disease, and despair. The Atlantic now carried not only explorers, but the enslaved, transforming oceans into instruments of both connection and cruelty. The birth of global awareness. For the first time, every corner of the planet was entangled. Silver from Peru financed wars in Europe and trade with China. Corn and potatoes fed populations in Africa and Russia. Tobacco from Virginia altered rituals in Istanbul. The Americas were no longer distant. They had become the heart of a global system. The Voyages had changed geography into destiny. Yet the myth of discovery persisted. Painters back in Europe depicted serene meetings between noble explorers and grateful natives. In reality, the contact zone was a field of misunderstanding. Generosity misread as submission. Curiosity mistaken for ignorance. Still, both worlds learned from one another. New crops saved old continents from famine. Indigenous knowledge of navigation, botany, and medicine shaped European science. The meeting was not a simple conquest, but a fusion, often violent, sometimes luminous. The long echo. The age of exploration left behind more than colonies. It altered how humanity imagined space and time. Maps grew accurate, but mystery did not vanish. The same winds that carried Columbus carried others. Magellan circumnavigating the globe, Drake raiding Spanish ports, Cartier sketching the frozen north. Each voyage expanded the borders of the known and the appetite for more. Curiosity, once a whisper, became policy. But for those who already lived here, the echo of those sails never faded. Stories told in native lodges still remember the moment strangers emerged from the sea, pale and loud, carrying thundersticks and diseases. Some prophets said the world had turned upside down that day, and in a sense, it had. Yet from the chaos, new nations, new peoples, and new ideas would arise. The land itself would become the crucible of reinvention. Nightfall on the open sea. Imagine now the decks of a wooden ship rolling in black water. Lanterns swing, ropes creak, waves hiss against planks. Above, a dome of stars repeats its ancient patterns. A sailor stands at the bow, half afraid, half enchanted. He cannot know that the land he seeks will give birth to revolutions, to symphonies and sorrow, to a republic still unfinished. He only knows the wind smells different tonight, as if the world itself were turning a page. The Voyages changed everything, not only maps and markets, but imaginations. They taught humanity that the world was larger and more connected than anyone had dreamed, and that discovery always arrives shadowed by loss. The ocean never forgets the weight of those ships, nor do the continents forget the footsteps that followed. As dawn breaks over a new hemisphere, gulls cry and the horizon blushes gold. The sailor grips the rail, eyes widening. Land again, not the Indies, not the end of the world, but the beginning of another. Are you waiting for Chapter 3? To hear the discussion of the topic after the Seed of Settlement? Thank you.